This week in Arsenal, Kai Havertz records a goal and assist for Germany against Scotland. Bukayo Saka assists Jude Bellingham's winner for England. William Saliba records a clean sheet in his first Euros appearance for France. And no one knows what's happening with Arsenal's transfers. Let's get into it.
Maybe we'll have a good surprise for you.
Welcome in to This Week in Arsenal, episode 61. It is Tuesday, June 18th, 2024. As always, I'm Sham. You can follow me on Twitter at Shamsdale. And with me, as always, is Sash, who you can follow on Twitter at LT Arsenal. Sash, how you doing, my friend?
Yeah, I'm doing quite all right. Quite excited about the Euros. Obviously, it's happening in Germany where I live. So really looking forward to that and trying to see if I can get some tickets to go and watch a game or two. But apart from that, the weather here has been really bad over the last few days. It's so humid. So yeah, looking forward to this podcast to help me cool off after some time.
Yeah. I've been trying to keep the movement to a minimum over here today because if I so much as engage in the slightest bit of physical exertion, I'm just sweating. My shirt had a few more buttons undone before we got on camera here. But yeah, glad to hear that you're doing well, and really excited to introduce today's guest. We're going to talk about all things Brazil and potentially Arsenal as well. And that illustrious guest that we have on today is none other than the correspondent in London for ESPN Brazil, Mr. Joao Castelo-Branco. How are you doing, sir?
Good. Thanks, guys. Nice one. Sash, Sham, thanks for the invite. Nice to be here to talk to you. I'm got the Portugal game in the background here, and looking forward also to Copa America, which happens at the same time this year, with Brazil, with a couple of the Arsenal players involved in that competition. It starts this Friday, Brazil playing on Tuesday, so looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, that'll be I'm viewing the start of the Copa America as a little birthday present because Friday will be my birthday. Super excited for it. The Euros have been great. Just got done watching the Georgia-Turkey game. I think that might have been the game of the tournament so far. A lot of good fun. Before we get into kind of the meat of what we're going to talk about, I'm trying to get better at, asking our guests to kind of talk about themselves and their career path a little bit. So, Joao, would you mind just kind of telling us a little bit about yourself and, kind of how you got to be where you are today working for ESPN Brazil?
I'm obviously from Brazil. I was born there, moved to London when I was 10 years old and grew up here with a family of journalists. I moved with my family, but I was always in and out of the office where my stepdad worked and playing with cameras and stuff and getting involved with that. And after I did university, I did a course of development studies. I sort of decided I would get into filming and went back to my contacts at this office and learned how to film, just working for free during the day, working in the pubs in Camden Town in the night, and got into it like that. Really, I was a cameraman first, but then as I sort of developed and had contacts in Brazil at ESPN, it coincided with a time where a lot of Brazilians started moving to the Premier League. It was ESPN Brazil bought the rights to broadcast that, and at Arsenal we had Silvinho. It was that kind of era, and Gilberto Silva arrived as well. So I started just filming some interviews for them and sending it to Brazil. At the time, we still had to send it by post or FedEx or something like that. There was, the internet was not quite able to cope with large files and that kind of thing. It was a different time. But yeah, it was always linked with Arsenal, linked with football was how I kind of started really. And that was a a long time, over 20 years ago, and kind of grew from there, becoming a one-man band, being able to film and present and interview and edit. And so now I've been a correspondent for ESPN Brazil for a long time, and we broadcast the Premier League to Brazil, which gives us great access as well to a lot of the big players here, especially the Brazilian ones.
Yeah, yeah. I saw recently that you did that first interview for is it Luis Guilherme over at West Ham? Yeah, I watched that, and it was it was a very natural conversation that the two of you had.
Yeah, that was great. It was that I got invited by the club and people linked with the club to do that interview for them, and I thought it was a really nice experience for myself to do that. Not as it's different from being a journalist as ESPN, because you're sort of talking from the club perspective. So just sitting down with the club first and seeing what they wanted from the interview, but also I think they like the idea of having me there to make him feel at home, someone who speaks his language. And by now I've been doing it for so long that sort of my face is kind of recognized a little bit by the kids who grew up watching the Premier League in Brazil. And he was one of them. He was, he's really happy to come to the Premier League. I was really impressed with how sort of prepared and professional he was at such a young age. He's only just turned 18. Looks like a great buy for West Ham. But it was a really good experience, seeing the behind the scenes of him signing the contract, meeting the manager, that kind of thing, which normally is behind closed doors for journalists.
Yeah, no, it's really cool that you get to kind of change between hats, right? Because I've also seen you kind of give interviews more like the more typical journalist style with guys like Gabriel Jesus and Gabriel Martinelli and other Brazilian players as well. And in this one, like you said, it was kind of more presenter function. So it's really interesting how you're able to kind of shift between those different functions. Yeah.
Well, I've also got my supporters hat on sometimes, which is I don't hide from the audience that I'm a big Arsenal fan since I was a kid, which gets me in trouble sometimes, because on my podcast that I have, podcast about British football in Portuguese, but also on my social media and Twitter, I'm openly a fan, and I can sort of separate things, try and be really professional when I'm working at a match as a journalist, but when it's my social media or the podcast, I can be a bit more relaxed and talk as a fan and have that kind of banter. But obviously supporters from other teams, you know how fans can be. As soon as I make any sort of criticism about the atmosphere at Manchester City or Chelsea or something, or a comment that's a little bit more, I don't know, critical of the ownership or something like that, I have had a lot of sort of hate from these rival fans saying that I'm an Arsenal fan and that's why I'm saying this and I'm picking. So it is a difficult balance sometimes, but it's also really nice to have this connection with Arsenal fans in Brazil, and now like with you guys all over the world. So I wouldn't change it.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's well, it's a really really interesting. I don't want to say niche, because Brazilian Arsenal, that is kind of a big subset, right, of the club and the fans and the experience. But it is really interesting, kind of to um to occupy kind of that corner of of Arsenal fandom the way that you do. So yeah, thanks thanks so much for kind of giving us that look into sort of the history and the day to day there. Speaking of the Brazilian players, though, just before we kind of delve into the particular ones, how are you feeling about Brazil ahead of Copa America? Looking at the squad, you have superstars like Alisson and Vinny Jr. and Rodrigo, guys like that. Are you feeling confident about Brazil's chances ahead of Copa America, or are you more like Ronaldinho, perhaps having some doubts?
Yeah, well, that Ronaldinho thing, apparently now it came out that it was a publicity stunt and he's taken it back, and it's so that it was a ill-judged sort of publicity. But
Yeah.
anyway, no, I mean, I'm excited to see the Copa America and the Brazil team, because they have some really exciting players, and especially with a lot of Premier League players who I follow all season and become a bit attached to, because I interview them a lot. The whole midfield is from the Premier League, and you have not just the starting lineup, but the subs as well. So there's so many: João Gomez from Wolves, Douglas Luiz, Bruno Guimarães, Paquetá. There's so many of them. Of course, the Brazilians at Arsenal, but I don't know. I don't know how confident I am, because it's a new manager. He's only had a few games in charge. He's only had 4 games now, 4 friendlies. It's a young team. The federation messed up with waiting for Ancelotti, thinking that they were going to get him, and had an interim manager. Anyway, it's taken a while to sort of settle down, and so this guy is the beginning of a new process, a new team. So I think that's a hard position to be in. So I see this competition more as a really useful moment for Brazil to get their team together before the next World Cup and start building something, But of course, Brazil's always looking to win. We've always got a good chance. There should be some great games, and it's a really exciting team without Neymar now. Without that sort of burden of obviously he has quality, but he also demanded a lot of the ball and of the attention and of the players. So I'm quite looking forward to seeing this sort of new free Brazil with Vinicius Junior and Martinelli and the young ones like Endrick coming through. It should be really, really exciting to see them in a proper competition.
Yeah,
No, absolutely.
Oh, sorry,
Go
Sash. I was just gonna say, it is a really interesting phenomenon in international football where you're kind of seeing it with Portugal right now, where they're starting to navigate the post Ronaldo phase, and I feel like Ronaldo is another one of those players who really demands a lot of the attention. Kind of demands that the play goes through him. So I'm Egyptian American, and I feel like we're also crossing that bridge with Egypt as well. In the last African Nations Cup, Salah got injured, didn't really make it back at any point, and once Salah left the pitch, it was really interesting to see how guys like Omar Marmoush and Mustafa Mohammed and Trezeguet all kind of stepped up in his absence and kind of played with additional freedom. So in that respect, it'll be really interesting to see how Brazil do that kind of post Neymar.
100%. Yeah, he's not done yet. He could come back for the World Cup because he's just injured, but it's a break from Neymar anyway. But it should be good. It should be good. Go on, Sash.
I think it's a good chance for us to also see some of like the other talents come up from Brazil. Obviously, relying on one player for so long to be like the spearhead, and there's obviously a lot of pressure on Neymar too. But I think there's a good chance to see some stars being born, if I might put it that way. And I think Brazil is probably the country which is most like passionate about football in the entire world, And sometimes I think that pressure can get to the players in the moment. I think maybe the issue at times, at least as someone looking from the outside, is that maybe the players take too much pressure and they should just play because they have so much of talent and flair. But despite me being a fan of Brazil, I'm always looking out for the Arsenal players that are there in all the different international teams. So I don't really support one country. I just want Arsenal players to do well. So the Arsenal fan in me wants to ask you about 2 players. One is Gabriel Magalhaes and the other one is Gabriel Martinelli. Do you see these 2 breaking into the starting 11 at some point, or do you think they're still maybe a bit behind some of the others?
Well, I think Gabriel Magalhães, definitely, I can see him getting a place in the team. It seems like the manager really likes him. He called him up even though he was injured towards the end of the season with Arsenal. Still, he hurt his arm and his shoulder, right? And he's only just started training with the squad with the Brazil squad, and they've had quite a few days, nearly 2 weeks together. So he's been there even though he's injured because the manager believes in him. So at the moment he's not been starting, but there is a space there which isn't in the defense. The defense hasn't been great, so it's not definite what the defense will be. We know other positions a bit more, but the defense there's his position. He's fighting with Beraldo from PSG, and I think Gabriel will end up taking that place. That's my hunch. That's my feeling for the Copa America, alongside probably Marquinhos as the heart of the defense, the two centre backs. Martinelli, I feel like the manager also really likes him, but he's got a tougher situation with the competition that he's got, right? So, but he's also clearly a player that will be coming on a lot. Whether he can start the games, I don't know. He would have to be really smashing it, and other players maybe dropping a bit. But because we haven't really got a striker for Brazil, which is a bit crazy thinking about Brazil. So many famous strikers in history, but we've had a bit of a drought, and Richarlison was injured, and Gabriel Jesus didn't get called up. So he's been playing with a three sort of attacking players rotating quite a lot. Rafinha on the right, and then Vinicius Junior sometimes on the left, sometimes he's in the middle. Rodrigo swapping with Rodrigo. So for Martinelli to get in, it's a tough call, right? Especially if he plays on the left, where there's Rodrigo and Vinicius Junior, who's like one of the best players in the world right now. But he's always the first to come up. He's like the first choice to come in. And in a competition like this, there's going to be a rotation. And so it's Martinelli and Endrick are normally the players that the manager will choose to come in. And I mean, in the last, we've played 4 friendlies in the run up to the Copa America. One game against Mexico, Martinelli did start the game and he scored a goal. But this was a game where he changed everyone. He sort of put in a new team to test people out. But in the other games, he's always coming on. So yeah, to answer your question, I think I would bet on possibly Magalhães getting a place in the starting lineup, and Martinelli not, but a player that will be coming on most games from the bench to look to have an impact. And I think hopefully he will. I think it'd be good for him to get that confidence with Brazil after a slightly disappointing season with Arsenal. I'm sure you'd agree.
Yeah, absolutely. But do you see why maybe he had a dip this season? Because I think a lot of us were expecting Martinelli to really kick on from what he did a couple of seasons ago. I think he got like over 15 goals in the Premier League from open play at the age of 21, which is pretty insane. He took the league by storm and had a slight dip. Obviously, he's had his share of injuries, but do you see any concerns there, or do you think he's going to get back to the levels that he showed us?
I hope so. I think he will improve again. It's definitely normal to have a dip if you're quite young and, like you said, with quite a few injuries. But it was concerning, yeah, because the season before he was incredible, scoring so many goals, being a bit more sort of decisive with the chances he created as well. But this season, he really wasn't doing that consistently. At the beginning, he was okay. But I can't really put a finger on it. I can't give you the answer of why exactly that happened, but it just wasn't quite working out. But he still, even though he's had injuries, it's not like he's suffered something serious. Like you can see he's still got the speed. He's still, it's not like he's lost. Oh my God, like this is a problem for his career. Since his injuries, he's never been the same. It's not quite like that. I think it's maybe coming back and getting the confidence again and just the rhythm. Hopefully he'll smash it again next season, because it's great to see. I mean, it was so nice, especially as a Brazilian, to see the love that Martinelli got from Arsenal fans, because he was really lighting up the games. The 2 seasons before this one, when every time he would get the ball and he would get, everyone sort of like stops and stands up because he's so fast and direct and skillful. And it was great to see how, like I was saying, like the Arsenal fans just really took to him and loved him because he came so young. I think it feels like he's sort of part of almost like an Arsenal. He's obviously not from Halen, but an Arsenal player that has come through from when he was young. Yeah, it was great to see.
Yeah, no, and I think also a lot of us, like, we have this vision of him playing down the middle. Like even Mikel Arteta said, like, he's a Luis Suarez type of player. And you mentioned also for Brazil at the moment, you don't have a out and out center forward. So I do wonder maybe if that could be a position that he might end up playing. But I guess it's one to watch, and it'll be quite interesting to see what happens, because I think the sky is the limit for him, and I think Sham will agree with that too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, you know what? I think what the problem is, or at least what the problem was this past season, is, with Brazil, I feel like he just comes on and is asked to replicate what Vinny Jr. is doing, right? And if you have a guy like Vinny, you don't want him stuck on the touchline for 90 minutes, right? You want to get him as close to goal as possible. And you have, overlapping left backs like Wendell who help, kind of support that and allow for that. And I feel like when he was on the pitch for Arsenal this season, he was the one holding the width, right? Because either you had Zinchenko inverting into midfield, or you had Kivior trying to do the left back thing. You had Tomiyasu trying to do the left back thing, but neither of them are actual overlapping guys. So I think that was probably the issue. But yeah, no, I mean, it's been really lovely to watch Martinelli kind of come up. He basically was, he felt like a Hale End kid. I think that's how much people loved him. Yeah, so it's been lovely to kind of watch him grow up with us and turn into probably one of the best young attackers in the world. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I think people still have a lot of faith in him, which is not something you see often from Arsenal fans if a player has like an
Yeah.
iffy season. I feel like a lot of the time we'd be having debates about whether or not we need to get rid of him or something. But so that's encouraging to see. But in terms of another attacker, who plays for Arsenal and Gabriel and Brazil, Gabriel Jesus, like you said, wasn't called up this time around because he's still rehabbing that knee. That's been really giving him trouble since the World Cup in Qatar. Basically 2 years ago at this point. Do you find yourself worrying about Jesus long term? Do you think that knee injury is going to be something that bothers him repeatedly, or do you think there's still a chance that we're going to see that guy who came in the fall of 22 and really, took the world by storm and was probably our best player for the first half of that season?
I hope that this, not getting called up and having this time out now will help him rehabilitate properly and come back strong. No, I'm not worried really long term. I mean, I don't know details of the injury and exactly what's happening, but I still think he's a great player. It's not that he was necessarily had a real bad dip in form like perhaps Martinelli did. It was more that Jesus sort of lost his place, right? Because slightly by chance, I'd say Arteta found that new style with Havertz playing as a false nine or whatever, and instead of in the middle and having Jorginho there or whoever instead, and it worked. And then he just kept going. He was like, okay, well, this is really working out, and Havertz was doing a good job linking up well with Odegaard, and Jesus lost his place. It wasn't. I think he still looked quite sharp at times when he was, he's in the Champions League. He was really impressive. He scored some amazing goals, really important. So yeah, I don't know. A lot of people talk about we need a new striker, and would you keep Gabriel Jesus? I would love to keep him. I think he's a great player to have. He brings such a energy. I think he's a really, really good player. Of course, sometimes he could be better at finishing off the chances, but if we have a team like Arsenal do, where you have goals coming from so many different players, I don't see it as such a big problem. It'd still be good to get a striker in anyway, but keep Gabriel Jesus. The challenge is, or the problem is, sort of keeping him happy, right? Because he's a big player at this point, where he came in being an important player for Arsenal and lived that moment, and left Manchester City basically because he wasn't getting enough game time, right? And he wasn't a starter at Man City. He was still a player that was involved, and this is kind of what he's become at Arsenal towards the end of the season. And how is he going to take that? I think he'll probably take it a bit better than at City because he already feels quite important as a leader at Arsenal. He's really one of the most respected players, most well-paid players, and I think he's maybe a bit older now, a bit more settled down. Like he's had a kid, he's got his missus in London. Like I think he likes living in England, in London. He speaks English, so I don't feel like he'll be agitating for a move. But that's from his side, isn't it? I don't know if a good offer came, how Arsenal would react to that, because he's one of the assets that you could get a decent bit of cash for, right? Especially if you're looking to bring in a different striker. I don't know what's your feeling on it, guys, about keeping him or not?
Yeah, I like Jesus a lot, right? I do have issues with his finishing consistency. Um but I mean, like you said, we're kind of looking at a summer where the guys that were linked with selling are guys like Ramsdale and Nketiah and Nelson Smith Rowe, right? Players who've really kind of fallen by the wayside and are role players. Whereas Jesus still is kind of considered maybe not a starter anymore, but like one of those first 14, 15 guys, right? Who you
Yeah.
still gets a lot of minutes. So yeah, I mean, for me personally, I wouldn't rush to get rid of Jesus, but if someone wants to send a 60 million pound offer, then maybe that's worth considering. But yeah, I still think he's an asset to the team. It just might maybe come down to using him a little bit differently now that Havertz has established himself as perhaps a starting center forward. But Sash, what are your thoughts?
No, I completely echo your thoughts. So I think he's not a player I'm desperate to sell, but it's more like if the right offer arrives, like 60 million is a lot. And also, as Zhao mentioned, he's one of our highest earners also. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, based on what the report said, I think he makes something over like 250K a week. So getting like 60 million and clearing those wages could mean that Arsenal bring in another player in a more pressing position. So I would definitely consider an offer like that. But he's not someone I'm desperate to sell because I think he can be a very good squad player. I think he's shown that he can play out wide also on the left. And I think he's really underrated on the right hand side too. Like this season we had that victory against Man City when we won 1-0 and Saka was injured. That game, Gabriel Jesus was really good down that right hand side. So I think he's a guy who can do a job for you. You also saw against Bayern, for example, he can change the game. He can give us something different to what Kai Havertz does. And whilst Kai Havertz is physically more imposing, I think Gabriel Jesus is the sort of guy who's bit more mobile, so he's able to get sometimes in between defenders, twist, turn, cause some chaos. So I think he's a very good plan B option. But is he a player I see leading the line, 35 plus league games, scoring 20 league goals? I don't see that happening, unfortunately, because I think throughout his time in the Premier League, he's been a guy that's always underperformed his XG. So I don't think that's going to change overnight. I don't think at the age of 27, he's suddenly going to become this incredibly clinical finisher. It'll be great if that happens.
But he brings so much to the team, I think, even maybe not like dropping back and winning balls and battling and linking up, like creating chances. I think he's a really good forward player. Maybe like you need, maybe not the decisive one, but I really like him. I really like him. But Arteta's ruthless, man. Like we've seen him, if he sees a chance to get an upgrade in any position, I think he will take it, won't he? Like, I think it depends a lot on if like a really good opportunity comes up of signing someone who they really think would be much better for the team, and a good offer comes. But I think I would guess he'd probably be staying. That would be
Yeah.
my feeling on it for next season.
Yeah, it based on the reports, I think Sheshko was a guy we were really looking at as a market opportunity, and now that he's staying at Leipzig, I mean, who else is there? Maybe Osimhen, and I think the jury's still kind of out on that in terms of whether what he brings is enough to displace both Havertz and Jesus and sign him. So that'll be interesting to see. But I know a couple of years ago you spoke to Gabriel Jesus, and you two were kind of talking about how he came to Arsenal to be a center forward, Um, do you think there's a possibility now that he's not the guy at the number 9 position, that he would be more open to maybe being um, someone who also plays on the wings, right, instead of Martinelli or instead of Saka? And I think that is a really interesting situation for him, considering how many minutes that we put in Saka's legs at this point. And we've seen him kind of come in those situations. I think against Bayern is what's coming to my head right now, where he came in and kind of more so from the right affected play, assisted that Trossard equalizer. So yeah, do you think that's something that he'd be more open to?
Yeah, I think so. I think he just wants to play. Really, he came with that mentality, but because that's what Arsenal needed as well, though.
Yeah.
Like that's what we were looking for, and that's what. So when he came, he said, "No, I'm ready to be that number 9. Like I want to give this a go." Like he was really clear about that and adamant. Uh, but it's funny because in different points in his career, he's moved around. He's played a lot. He played a lot on the wing, and it was some of his best times, both at City and at Palmeiras in Brazil. I would have liked to have seen that more, actually, like what you just mentioned about, instead of Saka, for example, which Saka was playing too much. It was clear that he needed a rest. Like, and there was times when we had Jesus available, and like he was doing on the left, he was constantly swapping with Trossard, Martinelli. One would start, the other one would come on. I think we could have done that a bit more because I think Jesus is really good and effective on the wing. I think that would be a good option to have for Arsenal because, like we were saying, sometimes as a number 9, he just it's not that he scored some amazing goals, but he does miss quite a few chances, right? But yeah, I think I agree with you. I think that could be a good option, but I don't know where he wants to play anymore because, like you said, that in that interview he was really clear. He's like, "Yeah, I'm definitely I would, I want to be a number 9." And then more recently, when I had an interview with him, where he was saying, "I wouldn't change like the way I play, even if I could have more goals, I wouldn't change it because I know I bring a lot to the team. Like I know my strengths, and I think that's also important." So yeah, I mean, like we've had, I'm not comparing the style of the player, right? But Firmino, obviously, they're completely different what they did. But Firmino was a forward at Liverpool who wasn't scoring 30 goals a season, but he was really important to that team, what he brought, and he was essential to that Klopp team at the height of it. And you can have players like that who just can knit things together and just be important in other situations. And I think he's one of those players. Like when he plays, he causes chaos, man. I think he's a great asset.
Yeah, I think he and Jesus kind of make a pretty interesting 1-2 punch, right? Because they're very different styles. Jesus, like you said, is more of a false 9 kind of guy who'll knit everything together. When he first came to Arsenal, kind of one of the big benefits we saw from him was his ability to bring Saka and Martinelli into the game, much like how Firmino would bring Salah and Mane into the game and kind of put them in those central goal scoring situations. And then he's also someone who uses his movement, is able to drive at players with the ball, or at least he was. And then Havertz, is more of kind of like that physical. I don't want to say brute, but just a guy who can really hang physically with the center backs and really occupy them, and then ghost into areas in the penalty box, kind of on the back end of moves and finish them like that. So I think if we don't sign a striker and we do hold on to Jesus, I think we're going to see, it's not going to be Havertz starting every single time. I think we will see some interchanging of the two based on the teams we come up against. But yeah, I mean, I think they both have attributes that make them, worthy, important players in this team.
I would love to see someone like. I would like to see a player in that, but coming in, like, to be honest, I'd want to keep. I want everything. I want to keep Jesus, but like someone like a Isaac or something from Newcastle.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we'll be able to get him, but I think that would fit nicely, a player like that.
Yeah, I know Sash would love Rafael Leao.
Yeah, someone
Yeah,
like that would be really good. So for me, it's not about center forward or wide forward. It's sign the best player who is available on the market in any one of
yeah,
those positions, because it is such a bad market, to be honest. Like the forward market, there's very few
it's
players,
hard.
and
Yeah,
whoever's available are going to cost like over 100 million. So if you can find someone at a somewhat reasonable price, just go out and get them. But yeah, obviously everyone's talking about forwards, but I think probably a reason why we didn't win the league last season was the first half of the season. And at times I felt like we could have done with a midfielder, especially a left central midfielder, when Arteta was trying to play Havertz there and it was not really working out. And there's two Brazilian midfielders actually that we have been linked to in the past and even sort of in the present. So one of them is Douglas Luiz, and the other one is Bruno G. Do you see any of these two moves potentially happening, Joao? Or do you think maybe the future lies somewhere else?
no, I could see one of them coming. I think. I mean, like the links with those two have been going on for a while, right? Douglas Luiz was really close to signing to Arsenal. I remember speaking to him after a transfer window. Uh, my
2022, I guess it
Yeah, like
was.
a couple of seasons ago, right? The beginning
Yeah.
of the last. Anyway, um, he was really close, and then I think Villa managed to hold on to him, but he would be up for it. I think, although Villa now are in the Champions League, it's not the same as like Newcastle leaving Newcastle for, because these guys are ambitious. They, if you get a chance to go, they're happy where they are. But if you get a chance to get a bit more wages, play Champions League, live in London, they'd be up for it, man. So I think, yeah, Arsenal definitely like Douglas Luiz, and those are two teams that do need to sell players, apparently, right? Uh, Douglas Luiz was recently apparently almost left for Juventus, right, in the last couple of weeks. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, and Bruno Guimaraes as well. I'm a big fan. What a player! What a player! I would love to see him at Arsenal. I remember when he first went to Newcastle, there was talk that he was sort of available, and I really wanted us to sign him, and I thought we would, because we had the Edu and stuff, and we let him get away. He went to Newcastle, but
Yeah.
yeah, I can see him definitely leaving as well, even though he's really settled in. I like the way he's really embraced the culture at Newcastle, and he speaks English, and he's got a real connection with the fans. He's done so well there in such a short space of time, and adapted to the Premier League. But again, I can just tell that he would be up for it. Like, just going to Newcastle haven't got the Champions League. Their careers aren't long. If you can make a step up, he would. So it's whether whether it's going to happen or not, I don't know. But Arsenal have to pick. It's, limited resources. You're going to have to pick one big signing, and then maybe a couple of like cheaper ones. And then where do you put your money? Because Bruno would be expensive.
Yeah.
Do you put your money on a striker, or do you go for the midfield? But I would, not just because they're Brazilian, but I would be really happy with either of those. I don't know which ones you guys think, that they're slightly different players who would need the most. Like, Bruno's a bit more creative, maybe, and Douglas Luiz is a bit more like a alternative for Partey, say, and whereas Bruno is more of an 8, like you were saying, where we had perhaps envisaged Havertz originally.
Yeah.
What's your take on it?
I think personally that Bruno G is the guy that we have to go for. Like, I would even pay
Yeah.
100 million to get him, because he's a known entity, right? Like, you know
Yeah.
exactly what you're going to get from him. Same with Douglas Luiz, but as you mentioned, Bruno G is a guy who's more creative. He will look up and pick that pass. And I think someone like Martinelli, I think Martinelli's form partly suffered since Granit Xhaka left, because when Xhaka, Zinchenko were on that side, a lot of the creative side was taken care of by the left back and the midfielder. But last season, obviously, Zinchenko was not the same Zinchenko. We were playing
Mm.
Kivior there, who was also just finding his feet. And on that left central midfield spot, we were playing Harvard and sometimes Declan Rice. But Declan Rice, I see him more as a ball carrier there as opposed to someone that's going to slip Martinelli through. So I think having a guy like Bruno G, who can, suck in defenders with his guile and his vision, can also slip Martinelli in. I think it could be a really, really devastating combination on that left-hand side. But Sham, what do you think? Do you concur, or would you go for someone else altogether?
Yeah, it's tough because I think kind of the emerging theme of this summer transfer window has been there aren't really any attainable, eye-catching players, right? Um, so there was that athletic report that came out today. I think it was from Gunner Blog, who said that we're leaning towards getting a six, just because we feel that there are better options there, right? So that does include guys like Bruno Guimaraes and Douglas Luiz. So
Yeah, they're hybrids, which is what makes them so good. They
yeah,
can
and
sit.
I think it would be really interesting for us because Rice is a 6-8 hybrid. So I think, you'd see us kind of go back to a double pivot situation where, if one guy goes up, one guy sits back, Odegaard maybe shuffles into the center as a number 10. So yeah, I think Douglas Luiz, maybe that's just a guy that we've missed the boat on a little bit. I wouldn't be upset if we signed him. I think, like Joao said, Aston Villa is a Champions League club now. So, I think it'd be a little too expensive for us to get our hands on him. I think that would require a big salary. Um, and yeah, I'm just not sure about Douglas Luiz defensively, but with Bruno's a really interesting player. And he's kind of got that bulldogness about him, right? In midfield, he's very gritty, to put it politely, but also on the ball. Like you guys have both said, he's really creative, right? He can play really great long balls in behind. And if I remember correctly, I think it was about a week ago, rumors were going around about someone having triggered the £100 million release clause, and all signs pointing to that being City. I think since then it's been basically disproven. But for a second, I was kind of thinking to myself, Bruno G pinging balls over the top to Holland, pinging balls over the top to Doku. It's a little scary, right? So yeah, I think Bruno's probably the one out of those two I would pick. In terms of what the other options are, I don't know. There's Onana. I like Onana. I think he's a better passer than people give him credit for. I'm not sure, though, if he is the guy. Joao Neves over at Benfica. Really, really promising. Probably the best ceiling of anybody on the market. But that's a £100 million player that we're talking about there. So do you want to spend that money on a teenager who's unproven in the English league? I don't know. And then there's, I think, Fofana over at Monaco, who's available for apparently £15 million. Really good player, but does he solve all our problems? I don't know. So, but out of the two Brazilians, I would definitely, I think I'd take Bruno for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I worry with City, like you're saying, though, like especially if the talk of, I don't know, maybe Kevin De Bruyne going to Saudi Arabia, or Bernardo Silva, every window he's sort of looking to get to Barcelona or somewhere. Maybe if they lose one of those players, and because they've been trying to sign Lucas Paquetá from West Ham for the last couple of seasons, but with his investigation and it's not looking good for him, I think they could turn their attention to Bruno, and they would go all guns blazing on that one. So I think because they already lost Declan Rice to Arsenal, didn't they? Like, I don't know. They wouldn't want to miss out on another one. So that could drive the price up as well. But I would love to have him at Arsenal. He's a great guy as well. But anyway, we'll see.
I feel like he's one of those players who you hate if you're playing against him, but you love if he's on your team.
Absolutely.
Yeah. which I can respect that. Although I will freely admit that Bruno's really pissed me off on several occasions. But yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see. In terms of maybe other directions our transfer window could go. With Mbappe and Endrick both moving to Real Madrid, right? You now have a very crowded forward room. With Vinny Jr. and Mbappe and Endrick and Rodrigo, among others. So Rodrigo, I feel like is someone who's kind of been touted among the Arsenal fan base as maybe someone who, if the right dominoes fell, could become an option for us. Is that something that you think is, I mean, even remotely likely that, the arrival of those two new super important players could potentially displace Rodrigo or even Vinny and make one of those two on the market, so to speak?
I can't see Vinny going anywhere, despite all the shit he's taken with racism and stuff in Spain and everything. But I don't know. He's become like the main man for Real Madrid, obviously with Bellingham, and now Mbappe will be there. But Real Madrid, I think, have embraced him as well, and I don't know. I could see it with Rodrigo, but I can't really imagine them selling Vinicius Junior. But I could see it happening with Rodrigo, especially he's always the first one to get sort of to lose his space, even though he's been amazing, especially in the Champions League. And yeah, they're not going to be able to fit everyone in, right? I mean, when Mbappe's there, he's going to want to play all the time. Endrick will be, he can take his time, although it might be difficult to hold him back if he starts being really good, but he's so young. But yeah, I can see a space opening up there, but I don't know if that would be right now, because he might wait and see, like give it at least to the next window to. But I think he would be open to a move to the Premier League. But I think I don't know, maybe he wants to sort of see how that imagine, even though you're maybe likely to lose your position, you might want to be part of that team for just a little bit, just to see, Vinny Jr., Mbappe, Endrick. That sounds fun, man. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. It wouldn't be cheap either, would it? That one.
Yeah, I think that would probably be half of a given transfer budget these days, at the very least, and that's just the transfer fee. I don't even know what kind of salary he'd be asking for. It definitely feels more like a pipe dream sort of situation, but yeah, we'll see.
Again, that's more of a sort of a Manchester City type signing. I think they can afford a big salary, tempt the player. But anyway,
yeah. For now, we'll see how those investigations pan out at the end of the year. But yeah, I mean, Sash, how do you feel about Rodrigo at Arsenal?
Oh, I'll be thrilled to bits. Like, what a talent, and look at the experience that he's had. I think that's what Arsenal needs, someone who has that experience in Europe, because when we went in against Bayern this season, I think the reason we missed out was I think we lacked a bit of that experience and streetwiseness against that team. But having a player like Rodrigo who's actually done it on one of Real Madrid's biggest Champions League nights against Man City, doing what he did, just having a player who's done that on the biggest stage, just imagine what it can do to the players in our squad. So I definitely agree with the line of thought that that's the sort of player that we should be targeting. But as Joao said, I don't think it's super realistic for Arsenal, especially if a team like City come knocking. But it's also interesting because we have a real Brazilian contingent at Arsenal, right? From like Gabriel Jesus, Magalhaes, and Martinelli, and also the technical director. And Joao has also spoken about how the players, they obviously like London, big salary. So
all that definitely helps, man. Everything
yeah,
you just said, 100%.
we are proper vibes FC, So
also, Edu puts on a great barbecue.
Yeah, exactly. He's cooking. only on low heat at the moment, but I hopefully will pick up.
Yeah. Well, Joao, I know you have to take off, so we'll put a bow on it here. But it was really so great to have you on, and looking forward to having you on in the future, and hopefully, we're looking at a Copa America that's very successful, not only for Brazil but for Martinelli and Gabriel as well. So, thanks so much for being here.
Pleasure. Really nice to meet you guys, and thanks for the invite. Always good to talk to some Gooners. Shout out to some Brazilian Gooners who have come on and made some comments here as well. I saw earlier on in the at the beginning. So there we go, Brazilian Gooner. They like.
I hope this was not something bad, by the way, because I don't speak.
No, it's all good. Yeah, no, it says he's saying nice things about me. They like I've become a bit of a sort of an ambassador as an Arsenal fan for the Brazilians representing here in England. So it's nice. But yeah, really nice to talk to you guys, and good luck with the project. We'll keep in touch, man.
Yeah, sounds good. And for the looks like about 3,000 of you watching, you can follow Joao at J_Castelo-Branco. Castelo-Branco is all one word on Twitter. And you can follow me at Shamsdale. You can follow Sash at LT Arsenal. You can follow the pod at This Week Arsenal. And if you're watching on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell. If you're listening on Spotify and Apple, please do leave the 5-star review. Really does help out. And we will be back next week to talk about more of the Euros games and the Copa America games and some other news. But until then, thank you so much for being here with us and listening to us talk about the Arsenal. So until next week, be a Gooner, not a goon, and we will talk to you soon. Until then, take care and bye-bye.
Maybe we'll have a good surprise for you.